I feel like we should have some intro music, but you guys already know what time it is. It is time for another episode of That LCO Show. I believe we're up to episode 6, but I couldn't tell you, to be honest. We've done a lot of these, and you know the drill. Calvin, say hello. We've got our scuff set up again, but yeah, make an introduction.
Look. Our setup is just getting worse and worse every single episode, but the quality is just getting better. All right. So that's all that's meta. All right.
Exactly. So, back again for what was a actually surprisingly banger of a week of games. I think we saw particularly day 3 of this Super Week. There was a really good caster on the broadcast. I think he made it just so much better. But no, there were some really, really good games, and we are here to talk about them. So, Kelvin, at the end of this week, Chiefs are now the sole team to be in first place.
Yeah, I mean, it's surprising, but not surprising at the same time, right? Like, going into the split, we expect the Chiefs to be the best. However, P sort of caught everyone off guard, and they beat Chiefs in the first round robin. Now, this round robin, though, Chiefs actually took the revenge, and they defeated Peace in just the last Super Week. So now they're actually back to the top, and at a score of 11-1. So the only one loss is of course against Peace, and whereas Peace actually dropped a game to the now 7th place Kanga.
Yeah, and so I think what we're starting to see here is a bit of an upwards trend for the Chiefs, right? They were very slow to start. We particularly touched on that in our earlier episodes, but now are we starting to see them, become this super team that everyone thought they were at the start of the year?
Well, I mean, I feel like they're still looking pretty shaky, right? Like in some cases, right? Whenever they mess up, they do mess up quite hard. However, I think what is really showing is the player's skill, right? We have Topunyo consistently being probably the best player in the league, and then you have Raze making huge plays when it comes to mid-late game, and everyone just starts to get better. Basically, that's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, so one thing I did want to talk about this game, and I brought this up on broadcast, but it actually felt like Peace were being a bit cocky in how they played the game. I much preferred their draft, by the way. I think their draft was like 10 times better than Chiefs. Chiefs had very little hard CC, so very little, ease of execution in terms of how to make these plays. But we saw, TN flashing under the turret, trying to get a solo kill. Beats actually just trolled the lane.
He pulled a maximize. That guy pulled a maximize and
ordered the turret. Yeah, I know. Yeah, he did. He flash ordered the turret. But yeah, and Beats as well. Getting caught out in what was very uncharacteristic from him. Right, we've been singing his praises as to how consistent he has been as a player for Peace for the last almost every single week. But this week, his early laning just sort of seemed like he was getting a bit overconfident.
Yeah, I mean, Beats usually do this. However, he never really got punished in the first few weeks, and it's very nice to see, the support players, the bot lane actually just getting better and contesting Peace bot lane, because so far, Peace bot lane still have 100% first blood rate. Do you know that?
Really?
Yeah, I mean, if you go to GOL.gg, which is the stats site that a stats site that a lot of casters and coaches use, and you just go to first blood participation, Cheon and Beats still maintain that 100% first blood participation.
Did they get it in this game though?
They might.
I don't think they did. I think they died.
Maybe it just wasn't updated then. Maybe this is the game that they broke this record.
Yeah, but I mean, so that is a very impressive stat to hold for this long.
I mean, up until now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess GOL just wasn't updated when we were recording this.
Yeah, it does take a bit of time to update. I know that when we were on broadcast trying to look for stats, it didn't update with the ones from the game, so I don't know whether that how long it takes to update. But one thing I did want to touch on was actually the draft from Chiefs. Tom Kench first pick, which is something we used to see this in OS back when Tom Kench was first a top laner, right? Because he could be played top and support, so he sort of had that opportunity to flex. But here, you're picking him essentially, he's going to go support. Tom is already a champ where, sure, he's good in lane, but a lot of enchanters have very, safe and stable laning phases into him, and then are just going to provide a lot more value later on. So, I think this was just something they did to get comfort for Dragku and secure it in the draft, because we know that Beats has been a pretty prolific Tahm Kench player in his time. So yeah, it's interesting to see teams like the Chiefs just saying, we're not going to draft traditionally, we're going to pick for comfort instead.
Yeah, I mean, Tahm Kench is one of those champions where I think at the beginning of this patch, when the guy just randomly came into meta, I wasn't really convinced. I think the champion has a lot of weaknesses, like you said.
Yeah.
He gets outscared by a lot of champions, right? Especially the enchanters. And he also struggles into some champions, like fairly niche, like melee champions. I think Brom does decently well into Tahm Kench. You have Rel that does decently well into Tahm Kench, and like Nautilus and Leon are completely fine into TK as well, as long as you don't just engage, without using your brain, right? Now, the one thing that I'm seeing right now, though, is the inability for Oceanic supports to actually punish this Tahm Kench pick, to a point where somehow first picking Tahm Kench is actually viable. Now, I think this probably leads to another topic, but I do expect to see Tahm Kench rise in the popularity in Oceania next week. I think this is something that people should explore a little more, just not really first pick.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with that. I think Tahm Kench is actually an extremely versatile support. In terms of laning, it is probably one of the strongest melees in terms of the sustain it has, the trading it has. It has really good poke as well. Just spamming that Q in lane. And getting quite a lot of healing from it too. And not only that, right, but you have the option to engage with your W, or, just ult. I think we saw from Beats actually a really, really nice play. I don't know if it was this week. I think it was this week. But they're essentially, Peace was sieging the tier 1 turret, and Beats W's on the spot. Like, he runs up and W's on top of himself, right? And obviously, as the opposing team, you have no idea where he's going, so you're going to back off. But I just thought that was a really cool little mechanical play.
I think that was the game against Order. I think that might be the game against Order.
Yeah.
Where he played TK into Order's comp, and he literally just dubbed it right on top of himself.
Yeah.
And everyone was just thinking he was engaging, and everyone just backed away. That was actually pretty cool.
I thought that was very interesting. But yeah, I think we will definitely start to see more Tahm, especially as we know how prolific the stuff like Leona, the stuff like Nautilus, those really engaged champions are, and Tahm has a really good time playing against those supports. Speaking of supports, we have sad news. There's a sad vibe all around the league, because Dragku, fan favorite Diz, is leaving the Chiefs.
Yeah, I mean, just like roster changes in the meta, where you see champions being picked and stuff. This week, actually, we saw a lot of different roster changes. Right, I think Dragku is the one that came the latest, because he played this Super Week, and then he announced that he is leaving Chiefs. We also have a few more that we will touch on. In a sec. But Dragku, frankly speaking, I don't think he has been the problem for Chiefs. I mean, obviously there were times where he showed a lot of hesitation in terms of engaging. He whiffed a lot of engage, and also his lane phase hasn't been particularly good. Right, but it was kind of surprising to see that Dragku is announcing that he is leaving Chiefs.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, look, I don't know behind the scenes stuff how that sort of all worked out, but one thing I do want to say, and I think this is actually quite likely, when you are on a team like the Chiefs, right, and especially as Dragku, there is so much pressure on you to perform, right? Because if you look at that team, you're like, okay, I'm playing with the best top laner in the league, the should be best jungler in the league, and then I have Tally and Raze, right? Who are like top 2 in their role. So you're coming in as Dragku, you're like, there's such a burden on me to be able to perform and not be that weak link. And that's what I think a lot of the, the hesitancy, like you said, Calvin, or the missed engages come down to, right? Because when you are second guessing yourself at all these stages, it makes like engaging really hard, because you don't want to be the one to like, flash in and then die and lose your team the fight. So I'm glad. Oh, I just dropped my mic there. I'm glad Dragku is getting time to step away from the pressure. And look, I'm sure that this is not the last we're going to see of Dragku in the league. He's a really good engaged player. And he's known for his Yumi as well, right? So I'd definitely be surprised if this is him walking away from the league forever.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny because like when you look at Dragons champion pool, right, you have all these buff, like really, really buff, really tanky champions, and then there's just this Yumi.
And then there's
And then there is Yumi. But yeah, I mean, I do hope that this is not the final performance that we see from Draco because, frankly speaking, right, he is better than most supports in Oceania in the current state. So I do hope that some other team, potentially pick him up. I do hope that, we'll see him in solo queue and, eventually making his way back into competitive. And and let's talk about the person that replaces Draco.
So okay, I don't know,
Or,
I don't know if we're meant to say this, because it hasn't been announced yet. So,
I mean, it's rumored to be.
look, I mean,
Right?
it's
Look.
going to happen next week, right?
I think by now everyone knows.
In 3 days from now, it's
Yeah.
gonna happen. So the player that is gonna be playing support for the Chiefs is Aladoric. Now, Aladoric, notably had a pretty rough off season this year. I mean, for one of the best players heading into, 2022, not receiving any offers was pretty scandalous, right? And I think the main reason that happened was just because a lot of teams already had sort of their bot lanes locked in, and also like Aladoric has been known to be a bit difficult to work with, right? I love the guy personally. I've never experienced anything like that, but that's sort of the vibe that's going on. So now to see him pair up with Raze, right? Is this the second coming of like the Violet Aladoric? We're just gonna absolutely shit on everyone 2v2 bot lane and carry every game.
Well, my take is that I think Aladoric complements Raze really well, but I don't think they will become a bot lane that's as scary as Violet Aladoric last year. Because Raze, in my opinion, like my take is that I don't think Raze is a really solid laning player. Like he doesn't really play to win lane and then explode the game, right? I feel like Raze, in my eyes, he's more of like a farming. He's very stable in lane. Obviously, he will get kills if the opposing bot lane doesn't play well. But to me, he's more of the player that will always, get out of laning phase 10 CS per minute, and he will have an item advantage, and he will just destroy team fight. And Aladoric, being a more aggressive laning player, and also being probably just as good as Draco in terms of engaging outside of lane, means that the weaker laning phase that Chiefs have shown so far would probably be midgeted in some way.
Yeah, and one thing I want to bring up about Aladoric is I think one of his strengths particularly is playing around that mid jungle. As a support, like his roam timers and being able to link up with someone like Arthur is going to be really key, right? Because I remember especially last year, that was one of the big worries playing against Peace, right? Is because, yes, they have the avenue to just 2v2 boom bot, but if the opportunity arises, he'll be roaming top, he'll be roaming mid. So I think Aladoric definitely is coming in as one of the best supports in the league. And it's just to see whether, he clicks with that in that really competitive environment.
Yeah, and it's really good for Chiefs as well, right? Because Arthur is one of the players where I think coming in, we expected him to probably be the best. Obviously, I think that title now goes to Balkan for now. And
I think Kevy, but...
Oh, actually, Kevy's up there as well, I think. But I do think Balkan is a lot more aggressive. But, that's another topic that we'll talk about a bit later. But, yeah, I mean, I think for Arthur, right, like, he's making aggressive plays. However, he's not really being backed up by his team. So maybe the addition of Aladoric will be able to complement that style a little more.
Yeah, absolutely. And another substitution that we've seen this week, we don't have to worry about announcing this because it's already played, is Fido coming in for Chungi. Yeah, that's a good point as well. So Fido, we've already seen him. He played quite well in his Vex game versus Order. I think there were definite signs of life for Kanga there that we didn't see in Kanga's last game against Order. And he also offers a pretty unique champion pool too, right? It's sort of both Kanga mid laners are sort of known for picking their niche stuff like the Cassio in these games. So what do you think of Fido? How do you think he's been performing? And do you reckon he's an upgrade?
Now look, I like Fido as a player. He used to be one of my mid laners back in I think 2018. That was Sin Gaming slash Mammoth, the first split of Mammoth, and he. So knowing him, right, he is a player that thinks about laning phase a lot. He analyzes his game basically every single game. Whether it's solo queue, whether it's competitive, he will look at how he plays his wave. He will look at how his opponent plays his wave. How he got advantage out of it, or how his opponent got advantage out of it. And I think this is something that a lot of players are missing in Oceania. Like I've dealt with a lot of players in my last multiple years of coaching, and Badoink is one of actually that's Phyto, by the way. But
Yeah, come on.
he used to be known as Badoink. I'm just too used to calling him Badoink. But Phyto is just this player that would automatically he would just automatically review games, and he would actually come to me with questions instead of me trying to go through players' games and try to prepare questions for them to answer. So this is something that I love about him. In terms of skill, I still think Chungy is a little better. However, the champion pool that Phyto offers in that Vex, in the Casio, something like that, like it's basically the action that Kanga has been missing for the first few weeks of LCO.
Yeah, and one thing I want to bring up is I think that, having an addition or having a swap in sort of any role in Kanga is a welcome thing, right? Because you look at this team, they're clearly not clicking, right? So even just having that fresh face in, and Fido mentioned this in his player interview yesterday, I think, Wednesday, but like, he is the one to, make the scrim set a bit more lighthearted, Instead of his team mental booming, he's going to be like, all right, nice guys, sure, we lost some games, but, we took some learning out of it. I think that's really, really important for a team like Kanga, especially as you look down the line, towards that sort of playoff thing. You can't be getting, even if you lose, right? If you're losing these games, you need that player to be able to, bring you all back, refocus you on the weeks ahead, because I think that if Kanga were to keep, the same 5-man roster, they'd just explode. And never have a chance of making playoffs.
Yeah, it's just weird, right? Like sometimes when you have to make roster change, it doesn't really have to be the worst performing players, because frankly speaking, right, like the few games that Kanga won, it's mostly on Chungy, right?
Yeah.
It was mostly Chungy that got fed, and it was surprising. Like it honestly was surprising to hear that Chungy got replaced. However, I feel like it actually changed, how Kanga played, and any change, like you said, Max, like any change is very welcomed on Kanga, and as long as it's make a positive change, then I think it's a good decision at the end of the day.
Absolutely, yeah. That like, you just need something's not working, switch it up, see how it is. Another thing that we've seen, that this was the change that I was probably the most surprised about, was Shinky coming back to Direwolves. Now, I looking at this roster, I thought Bulldog was actually performing quite well, especially for his rookie split. Like, he's played 5 weeks as a pro.
Yep.
So yeah, Direwolves going and bringing on board Shinky and essentially having 3/5 of what was Mammoth last year on their starting roster.
And yeah, I mean, that's really to my surprise, right? Like, to be honest, I think the problem with Direwolves isn't really a player problem, right? I think it's more so like, all right, you have multiple players that were bottom tier team last year. They had the mechanics, but they just don't really have the knowledge, right? Like, I think this is like the split where, players like Kiyose, like Gudo, and like Frost, like they develop their competitive knowledge. And I feel like right now, like Direwolves is losing games because they don't really know how to play the map efficiently. And it is just a little weird to me to see them bring in Shinky, and I can't really comment whether it's like an upgrade or not, because I haven't seen enough games just yet. And also, like, there was this one game where when they played against Mammoth, Bulldogs was subbing in because Gudo was sick.
Yeah.
Right. So there just wasn't enough. There's just not enough sample size for me to sort of comment on whether this roster move is worth it or not. But so far, what I'm seeing is, I think Direwolves' problem is still there, right? Like, the player still doesn't have enough competitive knowledge to play the map efficiently against better teams.
Yeah, and I agree with your point there. Like, I don't know if there was that much reason to make this change, right? Like obviously Shinky's a good player and obviously he has an experience with Frost, right? But unless there's something going on behind the scenes there, like from what we're seeing, Bulldog definitely wasn't like warranting a replacement. You know, he wasn't chain-eating his ass off or anything. I actually think he was performing quite well for how little experience he had. So, like you said, maybe it is an issue of experience, and they're just trying to get, you know, Shinky in, who obviously has played for a bit longer, has that extra year of competitive experience, to try to add some veteranship to the team. But yeah, that was the one that I was like, I'm really,
Yeah, no, that's just a bit of
I don't know.
phase, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I've made a spicy tweet last week, right, saying that, you know, some teams, some coaches and players deserve to get replaced. I didn't think Bulldog was one of them.
No, definitely
I
not.
definitely did not think that he was one of them. But yeah, I mean, we'll see how it goes. Next week is still a super week. You know, Shinky will probably get 3 games out of 3, and you know, after that we will be able to make a pretty good analysis on how you know, this Shinky versus Bulldog situation
Yeah.
goes.
Okay. Our sort of last point about the games for this week was Order. They finally got to take
Order
out
up.
PGG.
Order up.
Order up, absolutely. The early game was extremely rough. PGG playing really well against, you know, the Kevlin, getting those 2 pushing lanes in mid and bot, and essentially making his life hell with a late invade. But look, when Puma and Kevy get to stabilize and get to come to that mid game, I mean, with the early game that he had, Kevy played just absolutely fantastically, and Puma just showing that Zeri is still not fucking balanced, man. Like, this champion is just so disgusting. It has so much health, survives every engage, and has like 800 movement speed for the entire fight.
Look, the champion is definitely not balanced, and I think a lot of the credit that for Order winning this game comes down to Puma and on Zeri.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah. It's equal parts Nathan, equal parts the champion that he's playing.
Yeah, exactly, right? But, okay, the one thing that I do want to bring up is the draft. Now, I know you're probably biased towards Order, but I absolutely hate Order's draft.
Really?
Now, I absolutely hate it. Now, I do think that Renekton is a good pairing with Evelyn, but I absolutely hate the fact that we have a Renekton top lane and then a Tryndamere mid lane. Now, obviously, I think PGG grieved hit their draft as well with that Aatrox 5P, because, like, honestly, Graves into both Tryndamere and Renekton isn't even that bad. Like, let's just put it that way. Like,
yeah.
The problem I see with like LCO drafts is some teams, they just pull out really, really difficult to execute comms, and they're just trying to coin flip the games. Like, we see it in that Peace versus Chief series as well, right? Like, leasing Zillion and pairing with a TK, like, your only damage is Graves and Aphelios, which get severely outranged by the likes of Ari, the likes of Jinx, and the Jace, right? Like,
yeah.
I really hate teams that draft comps knowingly, because, like, they draft these champions after seeing, you know, some crucial picks on the opposing team, and they still opt into, you know, okay, let's just coin flip the fights. Let's just coin flip, because we're not gonna have wave clear, right? Like, Tryndamere and what's his name? Renekton is not gonna have wave clear. Everyone's not gonna help you wave clear, right? Your only wave clear comes from Zeri when you build the Tiamat items, right? Now, obviously, Order won against Pentanet, but I feel like that's more so because Zeri is absolutely OP, and the fact that Puma stole that second dragon was what flipped the fight, right? Like, that was the coin flip of the game.
Yeah.
Right? If Pentanet was able to get that dragon, if Balkan wasn't that greedy for that Raptors cam and got caught out, then that, like, Pentanet would just keep stacking dragon, and Order would just lose the game before they came online.
Yeah, so I'm sort of 2 minds about the draft. I'd actually prefer to be Order's draft in this game. I think that when I look at how these 2 comps want to function, right, I think Diana and Graves have literally an impossible job in this game. I think being even Aatrox as well. I think the whole top side of PGG just does what Order wants to do, but worse, right?
Yeah, look,
I think
I hate Order's draft, but I hate PGG's draft.
Renekton and Tryndamere are never gonna die to Diana Aatrox, like in a million years, right? They're just never gonna die. And then essentially you have all these targets for Kevy to one shot, like Yuri not building Hullbreaker. Obviously you're in mid lane, so you can't really. And both Yuri and Praedyth, right? Kevy is just free pickings, right? So I think Order's draft, like in terms of the solo laners, even in the AD carry, right? We saw in the later fight, Belkhan getting an ult onto Puma, and it doesn't matter at all. He just dances out. He just kills him later in the fight. So I think that, like, yes, it's a really rough early game for Order because, you know, PGG have Prio in so many of their lanes. But come that mid game, we saw fights be quite one-sided for Order, even when Kisei just didn't have his R key on his keyboard.
The man literally just unplugged his R key in a few fights.
Oh, I'm gonna sneeze.
That's you.
And we're back. Sorry for sneezing, guys. I had to go blow my nose real quick. Oh, allergies.
Right.
You know how it be.
Yeah.
Where were we, Calvin? What we were talking about the draft.
We were talking about drafts. We were talking about Order versus Pentanet. Now, yeah, I mean, like I said, I hate Order's draft, but at the same time, I also hate Pentanet's draft. I feel like Pentanet was well and truly in the direction of just winning draft and winning game, with, you know, Graves in the side lane, and then you have Diana pairing with probably another enabler mid laner, and then you have a hyper carry in Praedyth on that Aphelios, and they freaking picked Aatrox 5.
Yeah.
Aatrox 5th. Like, I don't understand. Like, I don't know what was the reasoning behind that. Like, probably matchup things. I'm not sure, but I don't think Graves does anything. Like, I don't think Graves loses hard into Tryndamere. I don't think Graves loses hard into Renekton, right? Like, obviously,
No.
Evelyn makes it a little hard, but Graves just matches some of the spells.
Yeah.
Like, your ultimate is on a 40 seconds cooldown late game, and none of these champions can stop you from ulting the minion wave to deny any push potential.
Yeah, and I 100% agree. I think the Aatrox pick does make it really weird. You know, even if you take this Graves and you stick it top, right, you're just gonna have this champion that really outscales the Renekton. Like Graves into Renekton, like sure it's a bit rough early game, but come 3 items, right? Like you're doing so much damage with every auto attack that it doesn't really matter. And another benefit of putting the Graves top this game is you get to build Hullbreaker. And that's the main reason I think the Graves pick was so hard for Yuri to play, even though he got a lead, right? Is because you have no magic resist, you have no defensive items versus an Evelyn, right? How are you ever going to survive in a fight if Kevy can target you and it's Kevy on Evelyn, right? So he will find those angles. And yeah, what champions does Aatrox have to reset on, right? Because Renekton has the Dominus. He's gonna have his Gore Drinker. He's gonna have Death's Dance. He's gonna have a Tryndamere who has ult, provided Kisei was being a bit of a homie and never ulting. Evelyn's hard to get a reset on because anytime Diana engages, you can just ult out. And same with Zeri. I don't see, like, normally you pick Aatrox versus champions that are immobile, you know, that you can get a really sick flank on in the back line. But I think this game, all we saw from Winterer was getting charmed by Kevy at the start of the fight and getting one shot.
Yeah, exactly.
So
and just die.
Yeah, I don't know what else you'd pick. Maybe something with a bit more DPS, but yeah, I don't know.
I mean, to be honest, Yasuo was up. Obviously, Yasuo doesn't really have a good matchup into that, but like...
Oh! That's another thing. Order came in with a really good plan against PGG's Diana Yasuo because they saw that Diana get picked, and then they picked Evelyn, Renekton. And what they're saying there is, you pick Yasuo, we're going to pick Renekton into it, and we're going to make you go 0-10. I remember, I'm going to go off topic here, but I'm going to share a scrim story we had last year.
Okay.
It was actually versus Kisei on Renekton, right? So, you know, we were known for playing out Diana Yasuo. We loved it. And Chiefs did what Order did here, and they picked Renekton early. And Chunky goes, fuck it, pick me Yasuo, alright? It's fine, the matchup's fine. And I'm pretty sure he actually ended the game like 0-10. Like, I'm pretty sure he ended the game just absolutely chain feeding the scrim. And we were all like,
I remember being absolutely fuming about it. I was like, dude, you picked Yasuo into Renekton, man.
Yeah.
And he was just like, it's fine.
It's probably the least fine matchup ever. Like, Yasuo has such a rough time.
You're right. But then at the same time, like you can always just go for like you can always go for lanes that just outscale, right?
Yeah.
I think Ari was available that game. You know that was completely fine. Although you do have
Ari's so hard into Renekton
Right.
though. Like you never have the
though?
damage to kill him, especially if you have
but
Diana.
also Renekton can never touch her, right? At the same time.
Yeah, but I think
Um,
I just think it's literally just, you don't have enough damage to kill Renekton.
Fair enough. But then like there's also I mean there are a lot of champions. I also think Vex really shits on the top side of order. You know, Tryndamere should never should never be able to get into Vex early on.
Yeah.
I mean even late game you're not really matching a Vex into Tryndamere, right? You're matching Graves into Tryndamere.
Yeah.
And then, you know, Vex, I mean, Renekton can't do anything into Vex because whenever you just slice and dice, Vex just fears you away, right? Like, and then Evelynn, as soon as you show against Vex, you basically get one shot, right?
Yeah.
Like, I just feel like there's a lot more options available than putting a Graves mid lane and then an Aatrox in top lane.
Yeah.
Like, that is probably one of the worst picks you can choose.
Absolutely, I agree. Anyway,
Yeah.
to stop bragging on that, we have our MVP of the week, and we're back. We're back to having the same MVP vote. So I
mad.
think it's pretty self-explanatory if you watch these games. But our MVP of the week is Topoon.
Yay.
Now,
Yeah,
let,
I mean, the guy's OP.
let me just read some stats. Okay.
Yep.
This is from GG. And these are all stats taken in 15 minutes, right? So his average CS difference at 15 minutes is plus 17.8. His average XP difference at 15 minutes is plus 742. His average gold difference at 15 minutes is 1,021. On average, this guy has 1,000 more gold than the enemy top laner at 15 minutes. That is just fucked.
Yeah, I mean, the guy is just OP. No? Like, what more can you say about this guy? Like, how are you able to be ahead of... Okay, not only ahead of CS at 15 minutes 75% of the time, you're also averaging, like, keep in mind, it's average, 1,000 gold ahead at 15 minutes.
That is so insane because if you take... So, CSD at 17 minutes, 18, let's average it out to 18. The average gold you're getting from a minion is what, like 20, 21? We'll say 21, right? Where's the mathematics?
I mean, I just went on...
360. So he's getting like 600 gold off plates, kills, whatever, before 15 minutes, right? So that if that doesn't speak to his dominance as a player, because, you know, we've seen him, he invades jungles, he takes camps, he pushes in, he gets plates, right? This guy is so capable. And another statistic that I thought was absolutely insane, he leads the league in solo kills with 17. 17 solo kills. That is unheard of. This early in the split as well, right? Like we're not even in the final round robin.
I mean, when you look at other like major regions, right? Like yes, there are players that's also up there in solo queue counts, like players like Rascal, etc. But do keep in mind they're playing best of threes. They're playing like LCK is playing way more games than LCO, and this man netted himself 17 solo queues over how many games? Over 12 games.
Nah, that's almost 1.5 solo kills every single game.
Like that is just insane. Like this guy is almost, I mean, it's not almost, like this guy is guaranteed to have one solo kill every single game. Like how insane is that, Max?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just...
You're also top laner, by the way.
The fact that he does it on so many different champions is what's really crazy to me. Like, it's not just like he's going to pick out Irelia and play for complete lane dominance. Like, he did that on Malphite and did it on Graves, right? These champions are not meant to get solo kills. They're just not meant to. That's not how it works.
I just have to say, this guy absolutely gave Liv the PTSD because Kanga had to just randomly ban Malphite. I remember.
Yeah, no,
There's this one game this week where they just randomly banned Malphite. I'm just like, why is Kanga banning Malphite? And then I just look at the names and like, oh right, it's Liv.
Yeah, he was a bit scared of that Malphite, but it's just so good for Chiefs, and a huge reason why they're at the top is that you will always be able to count on Topoon, and that's what it is. He's so reliable. There hasn't been a game this split where a team has been able to, you know, target him, starve him out of the game or anything like that. He's always, even if he doesn't have the best laning phase, right? Even if he gets weak-sided, he's always going to show up in those mid to late game team fights and take over the game. So this guy is a serious problem. And if teams don't figure him out, I think they're going to have a really, really tough time.
Yeah, and also one thing I want to highlight is this man, out of 12 games, right, he played 3 games of Renekton, but then every other game he played a different champion.
Wow.
He played 10 different champions in 12 games. Wait, 10? 9 different champions.
Yeah, nice. So you can't even bat him out, man. That's
how do you bat him out? Like, this guy can whip out that Gragas, he can whip out the Malphite, he can whip out the Cho'Gath this week, I think. And then, if you think like, all right, you know what, this guy's just a tank player, and then you just look at the rest of his champion pool. He's got Tryndamere, he's got Gwen, he's got Na, he's got Akali, he's got Graves. How do you ban him out? What do you play to him?
You can't. No, there's no way to ban him out. I would hate to be a top laner on blue side, going in and having to blind pick against Topoon, just knowing that you're either going to get solo killed 4 times, or he's going to just turbo your turret, or even worse, he's going to run into your jungle and take all your jungler's camps and kill your jungler, and then your jungler's never going to speak to you again for the rest of the week. So, Topoon definitely deserving of this MVP of the week. So, last thing on the agenda, next week of the LCO and the week after that are going to be played on patch 12.4. Now, we have received official word from the boss man, Mr. Peter Do, that Renata is going to be disabled for week 6.
Peter Dude.
I said Peter Do.
Oh, alright. I thought it was like Peter Dude. I was like, what? Anyway, so no Renata, but we can still quickly just touch on this champion, because I feel like this champion is pretty interesting. She does have a very fancy ult in that she actually makes the enemy sort of, like, quite literally kill themselves.
Yeah, I actually think the champion sucks. Like, I'm going to be honest, I think this is one of the release champions that I think actually is bad. I think the ultimate is really, really, like, yes, in theory it's fine, but first things first, it doesn't last that long, right? So unless you have something like a Vayne, like an 80 ADC that's going to absolutely one-shot their team in that duration, it doesn't last that long at all. And secondly, it's actually really hard to hit if you are playing against competent teammates, because it's so slow. It's just so slow. And then in terms of laning, she's essentially like any other enchanter in that she absolutely hates playing against, melee engaged supports. I think her ranged versus ranged matchups are fine, but she suffers from really long cooldowns.
Yeah, now, this is one thing that I also tweeted about, as soon as I see this champion. That was a long time ago, like when she first reached PPE. And the one thing to keep note is that this champion have more than 10 seconds cooldown on every single ability.
Yeah, I love that.
That's just rare. Like, that is so rare. I cannot think of another champion on top of my head, that have a 10 plus cooldown at level 18 without any ability haze. Like, on every single ability, by the way, that is. It's not like Zillion, where, your Q have more than 10 seconds cooldown, your E have more than 10 seconds cooldown, but it scales down really, really hard, right? Like, that champion, if you don't build ability haze, you're probably just only going to use one rotation this entire fight. And also, like you said, like, the ult is really easy to miss, and the duration isn't as long as I expected. However, this champion actually released with a 50% win rate, which is very rare. Now, I do think that her W is insanely busted in terms of giving the attack speed and also move speed, and also it resets the duration upon kills or assists. So I think that's like the really broken part about her. But I think with a little bit of tuning, this champion is more of like a solo queue champion over a competitive champion. So like, even if this champion isn't disabled, we're probably going to see her here and there, players going to try out a little bit. But I don't think she's going to make her way like deep into the meta.
Yeah, and I think to speak to those cooldowns, like, I think it makes a lot of bot lane matchups really hard, actually, when you have her as a support, right? Because you have such long windows to be vulnerable to trades, right? As soon as you use your W or your E, like, there's such a long window for the enemy to be able to engage that I think that, look, we might see some niche picks, we might see it with some niche champions, but as for now, it's definitely not one of those release champions that I'm like, okay, this is going to dominate the game, like we saw with Zeri, right? Like, we knew straight away Zeri was going to be pickle ban every single week, right?
I mean, the championship's not fair. Like, she even got a huge hit this patch.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, yeah. Do you want to talk about that? Because
Yeah.
saw Vega and Zeri get nerfed on this patch.
Yeah, I mean, let's quickly touch on Vega first because I mean it's smaller. It's a smaller nerf, but it's more like it's more straightforward, right? Like it's a lot of base stats nerf and also Event Horizon getting a few seconds increasing cooldown in the early ranks, right?
Yeah.
So basically, Vega, this champion is way too safe in lane. Like you're literally standing 800 range away and just queuing minions.
Yeah.
Right. Like if anyone wants to walk up and trade against you, they're trading inside a minion wave, which is always to your advantage.
Yeah.
Right? So. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, okay. So yeah, so Vega, you know, a lot of the base armor nerfs, the armor growth, Event Horizon nerfs, it's a lot targeting about it's a lot about like targeting his laning phase, making it a little harder for him to trade, and also making some of the matchups, especially the assassin ones. I mean, that's more like a solo queue thing. Punishing, right? More punishing.
Yeah, and I 100% agree. He's just too stable for how well he scales, right? And one of the things is he doesn't even have a weak gank setup because a lot of Vegas will rock the Predator, and then having all you do is when your jungler comes, you Predator E, and you essentially force a flash every single time. So I think that he needs to have some more clear weaknesses, and I think that, you know, reducing his early game power gives the teams more opportunity to attack him where he is weak.
And then Zeri.
Yeah, so
Let
Zeri.
me throw it first.
Oh my god, Zeri got so many nerfs. So her passive lost some magic damage, but gained a damage increase versus low health enemies.
I think that's mostly just to CS. That is a CS like a CS adjustment. So the one thing is like Zeri does use her basic attack, like the right click basic attack to CS, and her right click basic attack, it doesn't scale with AD at all. So basically at level 1 you're only dealing 10 damage. Your auto attacks only 10 damage. So the 500, you know, the 300 to 500% increase for the enemies against 35 below 35% health is mostly just to make sure Zeri can still CS with auto attacks.
Yeah, and so obviously some more changes to her passive, but now we're seeing an adjustment to her Q, which is making sure it says burst fires critical strikes now also multiply its base damage. So I think we've seen this the last couple patches. Right, just want to make sure that Zeri is getting away from this insanely tanky bruiser build, which I think, yeah, if ever there's an AD carry that can build like a bruiser and still do more damage than a traditional AD carry, it's just really unhealthy for the game. So I think they're going down the correct path, and just, making her a more traditional build path.
Yeah, so all in all, like the changes basically just forcing Zeri back to a crit build, or like the intended crit build, which I love, right? Because it's either the champion gets 3,000 health and like 100 armor measure resist and doesn't move fast, or this champion moves fast but it's very squishy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Like it's one or the other, so you can't really have both. Sorry, Zeri players. Sorry, Puma. You probably won't get another Zeri performance like that. In terms of, you know, just trying to run around, just taking no damage, or like you take damage but you never die. Like I still respect Puma having like really good skill. So like, you know, if Zeri still ends up being super busted as a crit player, as a crit ADC, then, you know, we'll probably still see Puma on it. We'll probably still see him carrying games. But, you know, tanky Zeri that moves fast and doesn't like and just deletes your entire team probably won't be a thing anymore.
Yeah. And our last thing to touch on this week are the support gold income items. So essentially Smite Top is dead. Thank God.
Yes.
Okay, so what they've done is let me try to read this.
So okay, so I'm just gonna give the TLDR, right? Like basically the way Smite Top abuses the game is the fact that you don't get a lot of gold income. You barely get enough gold income as a support, right? Like so that it's functional, but because your gold deficit against the opposing top laner is so big that it triggers the objective bounty.
Yeah.
Now the changes is that now objective bounty actually scales down by how many support items you buy on the team.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now that if you're going to have 2 support items in the team, it means that it's going to be extremely, extremely hard to trigger an objective bounty. Like the game is literally going to treat that you have 2 supports, you are supposed to be gold down.
Yeah, so one thing I actually want to talk about with this, and something that I think we could potentially see, is champions that can still abuse Smite Top, but still function in the lane. So one example that comes to mind is Pyke, right? Pike
Yes.
doesn't need a support item. He can actually play a lot of lanes just because of his sustain, his inbuilt regeneration makes it really hard to chunk him down. And Pike is probably one of the best champions at just roaming with the jungler and being a nuisance. So whilst this sort of removes, your Karmas, your Lulus, your Jannas from being able to play the game because they can't function without a support item, I still think there is potential for teams to explore the route of, having a more aggressive top laner that can just be like, fuck it, I'm going to leave the lane.
Yeah, I mean it's more like the roaming picks, right? Even some support could work. I can still see some support that doesn't rely on gold, right? Like there are not like plenty, but like there are still a few supports that they either generate gold themselves like Pike,
Yep.
right? Or they don't really need gold. So for example, champions like Bard,
Yeah,
right?
Bard,
The
Nautilus,
champion,
Pike.
yeah, like Nautilus doesn't really scale with gold. I mean, the new champion Renata doesn't actually scale with gold, by the way. Like the champion ult doesn't do damage. A lot of her utility doesn't need gold to happen. So like there are still a few a small subset of champions that doesn't actually get affected as hard, and we might still see them in solo lanes. It might just be a very underdeveloped a strategy, that it's forming, and maybe some people will still explore it.
Yeah, and I think it's cool actually that we're at a point in the game where, stuff like all this innovation can exist, right? Like we can be thinking about, okay, if I just want to ditch lane, what's the good scenario to do that and what can I play in that scenario? So I think it's a pretty exciting time. I'm definitely glad the traditional support like smite tops are gone. I think that they were just really, really annoying and just boring to watch, right? I think they were extremely boring to watch. Yeah,
Don't
so
leave me alone. Don't leave me alone.
look, I think it's fun for the top laner who gets to lane 1v0. I think everyone else on the map absolutely hates it.
Yeah, that's fair.
But yeah, anyway, I think that sort of wraps us up for this episode. Got a big week next week, as always. I think the last super week of the split.
The last super week.
So yeah, 3 days of games. We'll catch you there. I'm sure we'll both be co-streaming at various points. So Calvin, as always, thank you for joining me. Thank you for a banger episode. We're back to our usual length. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Check us out on our socials if you haven't already, and we'll see you guys next week. Catch ya.
Bye bye.